we are so excited to have Karen here today. She is a registered dietitian that will be speaking to us about food labels and also doing an Energy Bites cooking demo. As I'm sure you all saw, there was a recipe emailed to you that just looks so delicious, and I know I will be making it all the time. So Karen will be talking about packaging, and just a little bit about Karen. She is a registered dietitian, board certified specialist in oncology nutrition, and registered in New York as a certified dietitian nutritionist. Karen received her Bachelor of Science degree from Ithaca College and her Master's of Science degree from Hunter College. She works as an outpatient oncology dietitian in New York, and she also often works with local community centers to host nutrition programs for cancer survivors and their families, and leading classes on how to live healthier lifestyles throughout the continuum of care. So we thought it would be perfect to have her here with us today. So I will now hand it over to you, Karen, and for all of you, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat, and we will have a Q&A, however it works with the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So if you guys see, I'm kind of logged in two places so that later you'll be able to see me better when I'm preparing those Energy Bites for you. So in today's presentation, I'll give you guys an introduction, a little bit about myself. And as Carly mentioned, we'll be talking about how to read a nutrition label, how not to get tricked by the food packaging. The industry is very smart at making you choose things that sound healthy that might not be so healthy. So today I want to kind of talk about some of those things that you're going to see on the packaging, and then as well as easy things you can make at home. Because at the end of the day, when you put the power in your own hands, in your own kitchen, you know what's going into the products that you eat. And then that leads us into Energy Bites. So instead of buying those prepackaged snacks, it's really easy to make, and these are no-cook Energy Bites. So even though we're calling it a cooking demonstration, I won't be cooking at all. I'll just be putting these together for you just to show you how easy it is to really create a pretty natural and really nutritious snack. A little bit about myself. As Carly mentioned, I've been a dietitian for over 10 years, and I'm certified in oncology nutrition. I'm also a busy mom of 3 kids under 8. So I call myself a lazy cook, and recently somebody changed it to say efficient cook. I don't have a lot of time to spend in the kitchen. However, it's really important to me that I serve healthy food. So it's important to me to find easy ways to serve healthy foods to my family. A little bit of medical disclaimer that I always like to share, because everybody is at different stages in their journey right now. So this presentation is really meant to provide general tips. I always want you to follow specific instructions provided by your personal medical team, since they know your whole story. Nutrition needs really change based on your age and personal medical history, and it's individualized. So it's important to know what works for you. If there's ingredients in these Energy Bites that don't work for you, or you know you don't digest well, or you just don't tolerate them well, then they're not for you, and we could find something else that would be better for you. So really pay attention to your own body depending where you are in your cancer journey. So where do we start? You want to get healthier. You want to, put better things into your body. You want to fuel your body. So as you try to shop healthier and eat healthier, it's really important to shop the perimeter of the supermarket. That's where all of your more natural ingredients and non-labeled ingredients are. So you have your fruits and vegetables, and you have your meats, hopefully your lean meats, and then you get to the other side of the perimeter, and usually that's where you find your dairy and your whole grains and things like that. So when you shop that U shape of the supermarket, you're getting less of those processed foods. But it's inevitable. You're always going to find things that are also packaged, and that's fine. And that's a normal part of life, of eating, of shopping. But if you don't know what to look for, it's really easy to be fooled by what companies want you to think and want you to see. So I always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Really go into that store with a list so that you're not tempted by those things that are at eye level or in the supermarket, at the checkout line, just screaming, buy me, and you have that list, and if it's not on your list, you don't need to get it. So let's get into how to read a food label. So in recent years, the food label has changed slightly, if you guys have noticed. Now the calories are really much more prominent. They're big and they're bold, so you know what you're looking for. And also serving size has become more prominent. And really the first thing you need to look at before you put anything in your cart is that serving size. Now the label has become a little bit more intuitive to the point where if it's something that, you know, companies know that you're going to be eating the whole thing, let's say those vending machine bags of nuts or chips or drinks, and usually it's 2 servings, 2.5 servings. Now the calorie count might account for that whole thing. But that's still not always the case because not all companies have caught on to the new label yet. So really look at that serving size. Make sure that, you know, if the serving size is 2/3 of a cup, you are only having 2/3 of a cup. Because if you're having a full cup, then you're having much more calories than you think you're having. The nutrients in the middle there are the ones that I highlighted. Those are the ones you really want to limit as much as possible. That's going to be your fat, your saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium. And then the ones that I bolded in red are the ones that when products have these, you know that they're a healthier product in general. So your dietary fiber is what you want to get more of, and your protein. As a guide, the percentages on the side, I don't look through too much because it's really about the grams, because this is based on general 2,000 calorie a day diet, but not everybody needs or eats a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So those percentages really don't apply to everyone. But if you ever just glance at those percentages, just know that 5% or less would be considered low in that item. So for instance, this one is 10% fat. So this is like a high fat food. 20% or more is considered a high fat item. So your added sugar, this is high in added sugar. But 5% or less would mean that it's not as high. It would be considered a low product. So let's start with bread. Bread is one of those things that if you're not looking at the serving size, you could be very, very easily deceived. I found one here that tells you the serving size is 2 slices. But there are so many breads that actually only give you the amount per 1 slice. And most people, when they're making toast in the morning, when they're making a sandwich, whatever they're using bread for, they're usually using 2 slices. So when you look at that nutrition facts panel, it's really important to see one or to look for one that says 2 slices. And if it doesn't say 2 slices, it's really important that you multiply everything by 2. Because you plan on eating 2 slices. So always start with that serving size, especially for something like bread, especially for something that you plan on eating the whole package, because then you have to do some math. You got to get into multiplication to really figure out what you're eating. For bread is a great place to get in some fiber. You want to get at least 2, I say even 4 grams of fiber per serving. Fiber is, most Americans don't get enough fiber in their diet. Bread is a really easy way to make sure you're getting some more fiber. Of course, it helps with your bowel movements, and it's just a healthy thing that most Americans are not getting. I think over 50% of Americans don't get enough fiber in their diet. Bread, also, it's an easy place for manufacturers to add sugar. Try to find ones that have less than 4 grams of sugar. And then as we make our way down the nutrition facts panel, on the bottom, it says made from, or it'll say ingredients. Those are listed in order of most prevalent to least prevalent. So if you're trying to buy a whole grain bread or whole wheat bread, whole wheat flour should be the first ingredient. It shouldn't be the second or third. You might find oats or whole grains as second or third, but whole wheat flour needs to be that first ingredient to really know you're getting a whole wheat product. Also, it's important to use the label to find hidden sugars. Things that can be deemed as healthy foods, for instance, a non-fat Greek yogurt is a very healthy, really, recommended snack that I tell people to have all the time. However, for the same serving size, you get more than 50% more calories and 10 grams of added sugar when you buy a flavor variety versus 0 grams of added sugar. So people always ask, is yogurt healthy? Can I have it as part of a healthy diet? And my answer is usually, it really can be healthy if you buy the right kind. I always look for Greek yogurt because that's going to have a good amount of protein in it. When you buy some of the lighter yogurts that are not protein and you look at those ingredients, water is sometimes the first or second ingredient because that's how they make it a lighter product. They're just diluting it down. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to have it as a really healthful snack, you don't want that protein to be diluted. You want to get, your calories and your protein from it. So as much as possible, I would say to stay away from flavors because that's where your added sugar is coming from. And flavor things yourself. You could put half a teaspoon of vanilla in it to make it your own. You could put frozen blueberries in it to give yourself a blueberry flavor, or frozen strawberries, or just slice up some peaches, or even if you have canned peaches, whatever it is, you're controlling how much sugar you put in it, and you don't need to add an extra 10 grams of added sugar to it. Of course, yogurt's going to have natural sugar in it, right? Because it's a lactose product. So this has the plain one has the 4 grams. But it's those 10 grams of those added sugars that we're trying to eliminate. Another seemingly healthy food I'd like to point out would be something like oatmeal. So instant oatmeal, super healthy food, really easy to make that any time of day and have a warm, comforting bowl of oatmeal. But again, 50% more calories. And this one has 11 grams of added sugar, which, as you see, the percentage next to it is 21%. That means this food has a high amount of added sugar. So, if you need to use the instant kind because you're in a rush in the morning, that's fine. You could buy those plain ones. However, I would say make a big batch of rolled oats ahead of time. You have them in the fridge and you could just heat them up with, a dairy milk, non-dairy milk with some water in the microwave. And then you have a fresh bowl of oatmeal that you've made, what's in it. And again, you can flavor it yourself. So next we'll move on to some packaging claims, because really, companies have gotten very clever as to what they put on the packaging. So I just wanted to put a little research behind this. A 2018 study found that labels on whole grain products have been misleading people. Over 1,000 adults participated in the study, and almost half of the participants incorrectly the healthiest whole grain product. And I think right there could be a big reason why a lot of Americans are just not getting enough fiber. We think we're doing the right thing. We think we're eating the whole grains that we need to be eating. But at the end of the day, the packaging has been deceiving us. Up to 51% responded that they had a hard time identifying which were the whole grain products. So, and the same thing happens with this with, things that are labeled organic. So something that's 100% organic, then that's self-explanatory, right? It's using 100% organic ingredients. Something that says just organic, that means it's 95% organic ingredients. And something that says made with organic ingredients, that's something that's usually about 70% organic. So most of these things are regulated, and it's really imperative to know what it is you're getting that's listed on that package. So here are some examples of 2 snacks. I'm not condoning these snacks. I'm not saying these are the best snacks. I'm just showing that you might think you're doing something good by buying something that says made with whole grain or baked with whole wheat. But this is just a great example because it's totally permitted to say that it contains whole grains, even if it's mostly refined grains. So in your snack products, again, you think you're doing the right thing, but that first ingredient on there is enriched flour in one and unbleached enriched flour in the other. And then you have wheat flour, but again, it's that first ingredient that's going to be the bulk of that product. So the same thing goes when products say natural. According to the FDA, a product can say natural if it doesn't have added colors, artificial flavors, or synthetic substances. But that still leaves a lot of other stuff up to debate. So the food could still be a highly processed food and contain other artificial ingredients while still saying the word natural on it. And again, things like natural, things like baked with whole grains, things like, made with whole grains, things like that are eye-catching, and it's appealing to the consumer to grab those things. So if you're not looking at that label, you can be sure that if a product says baked with whole wheat and then it doesn't have fiber, look at that ingredients label. I'm sure that whole wheat flour is lower down on that list. It's the same thing with those snacks, like the fruit gummies. It says made with real fruit. Like, sure, it has a little bit of fruit extract, but it also has a long list of not so healthy ingredients in it as well. So then we'll go into, there's just different nutrient claims that packaging might say on it, so you can understand what it means. So on the front of the package, again, marketing, they've become very savvy to lure you in. So something that's calorie-free would contain less than 5 calories. Low calorie is 40 calories or less. Reduced calorie is at least 25% less calories than the original product. But this does not mean that it's a low-calorie food. You might find chips or cookies or snack products that say reduced calorie. It doesn't mean low calorie. It's just reduced calorie from the original. So again, reduced calorie draws the eye. It must be healthy. Not necessarily always the case. And the FDA is who regulates these packaging claims, and the rules and restrictions seem to constantly change, but these are the current guidelines. Same thing goes with sodium. So of course you could have a sodium salt-free food. You can have a very low sodium food that's 35 milligrams of sodium or less. Low sodium food is 140 milligrams per serving or less. And then you get your reduced sodium, your light in sodium, or your no salt added. This is super important for people who need to monitor their sodium intake due to heart disease or kidney disease. Certainly it's part of a healthy diet, and to prevent hypertension, everybody should try to consume lesser sodium products. But just to point out, something like soy sauce, when you buy, there's the red bottle, that's the regular one, and then there's the green one that's the low sodium. It's not actually low sodium. If you look at the bottle, it says lesser sodium. That bottle still has 500 something plus milligrams of sodium per serving. So just because it says lesser sodium, people think, again, it's less sodium, it's okay, it's good for me. It's still a whopping amount of sodium and should still probably be diluted with water before you use it. So here's an example of tomato sauces. This tomato sauce and salad dressing and any other kind of sauce is a great place for manufacturers and restaurants to hide sodium. When you buy soup in a restaurant, when you get anything that's covered in sauce, I would always say get sauce on the side when it goes to a restaurant. But then when you're in a store, you can look at that label. So on the top are your regular sodium labels. And then on the bottom are ones that say the Trader Joe's ones that says no salt added, the silver palette one that says low sodium, or the other one that has no salt added. So it's really imperative that you look at these things. And I mean, even better would be to make tomato sauce from scratch, which I'll get into in a second. But it's really important to look at these things because you don't realize, and especially if you put a dash of salt when you're making that pasta or whatever it is you're putting the sauce on, it's really important to keep those things in mind. So let's get into fat claims. So a lot of products now say trans fat free. You'll see it in a big star, in a big circle, whatever it is to attract your attention. But a lot of times I laugh because these are products that would never have this kind of an animal fat in it anyway. It's just a ploy to get you to grab that product. Again, the same with the calories. Reduced fat or less fat does not mean it's a low fat food. It just means that this product is slightly lighter than the original product you would have bought. So the FDA has been setting rules so that people are not misled. So for example, if you wanted to say only 10 grams of fat per serving, then you would also have to say not a low fat food. So that, because for a long time they were saying only 10 grams, and then people are thinking that's low fat. So the FDA has now come in and said, okay, if you say the word only, you're implying that it's a small quantity. But now if you're saying only, you have to also justify by saying not a low fat food. So I'll be very curious when you guys go to the store and see these things, if it's a little bit of an eye opener for you. If the quantity is not characterized by any way, if it doesn't say only, then they're allowed to just put 4 grams of fat. But again, they have to qualify it if it says only. Then we get to sugar claims. There's a sugar-free, which is less than 0.5. So sugar-free actually doesn't mean that it doesn't have any sugar, but it's a very small amount of sugar. Reduced sugar, again, less than 25% of the regular product, but it's not a low sugar food. Really, the no added sugar is what you would want to see on a label. But I would look at those added sugars, and that's what you want to see less of in your products. And lastly, I just want to point out nuts. I don't want people to be scared of healthy fats because now that we know how to read a label, we see that this is 23 grams of fat in a seemingly healthy bag of nuts. Now, there's healthy fats and there's unhealthy fats. And healthy fats are really important for heart health and overall good health, but they are also more concentrated in calories. So something like nuts is a very high calorie, high protein, high fiber, but also a high fat food. So it's very important to portion control. I love nuts as a snack because they have all those great things in them. But if you don't portion control, I like to say even a lot of a good thing is still a lot. So really, if you don't have the willpower to just have that small portion of nuts, then buy them in the smaller packages. Anytime you buy smaller packages, you're going to be spending more money because you're paying for the manufacturer to break it up for you. However, if you have the willpower to buy it in bulk, make your own trail mix with whatever you like, put it in your own bags and really portion it out, that would save you some money. Because nut mixes are really just a great snack. But if they are not the right serving, then you can really overdo it. I would also say don't be fooled by the trail mixes that have candy and dried fruit and yogurt covered things, because essentially that's just a way of adding sugar to your snack. So as much as possible, dried fruit is more concentrated in sugar. Usually dried fruit does not have sugar added. Sometimes it does, but it's a more concentrated form of sugar because they've removed the water. So now per gram, it has more sugar than if you just ate that whole fruit. So I would love to keep the fruits as their whole form and have their nuts separate when you can. Again, pay attention to flavored nuts. If it's roasted or barbecue, it's going to have more ingredients in it versus this one that just has your nuts, your oil that it's cooked in, and your salt. Raw plain nuts are always going to be your best. And then I say homemade is usually best. And the reason I would put the word usually is because it's very easy to add a lot of butter and a lot of sugar to things that you're making at home. But in general, you have control. When you make things at home, you're deciding how much salt, how much sugar, how many preservatives go into your food. You get to decide how sweet or how salty you want things. Jillian, am I going slow enough? Slower? Good? Okay.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Okay. Companies, stop me anytime. So companies have to put things in foods to increase their shelf life and make them more palatable to the masses. Not everybody has the same palate. Some people add salt to foods before they've even tasted it. Some people add sugar to things before they've even tasted it. So really take control of your own food and what you're putting in your mouth by keeping a healthy, stocked pantry and refrigerator so that you can make things easy on yourself. There are so many products that I think we're trained to buy store-bought that could really easily be made at home. And here are some examples. Something like breadcrumbs. I love to buy the fresh baked bread at a lot of stores that have the whole grains. Like Whole Foods has a great section of fresh baked breads or whatever bakery it is you go to. However, those fresh baked breads tend to go bad a lot quicker than your prepackaged breads. So what I like to do with those is I have them sliced and put them in the freezer. And then when I need breadcrumbs, those freezer slices could go in the toaster and go into the food processor with some Italian seasoning. Now I haven't added any preservatives to it and I haven't added any salt to it. And it's a really simple, really easy breadcrumb. So after you toast it, you have to let it cool a little bit or it fogs up and doesn't get that crunch that you want. So you toast it, you leave it in there, you work on whatever else you're working on for your meal. And then you put it in your food processor and right there you have breadcrumbs. Tomato sauce. Now, I don't have an old Italian grandmother that handed down her secret sauce recipe, but you don't need that to come up with a great sauce. If you keep different kinds of canned tomatoes in the pantry, whether they're crushed, whether they're whole, whether it's pureed, however you get them, they make a great base for tomato sauce. And then you can add whatever it is you like. You want to add chopped mushrooms, chopped garlic, chopped onion powder or garlic powder, oregano, basil, seasonings. The sky's the limit and you can make it your own. Again, this way you're not adding salt, you're not adding sugar, and you're getting a much cleaner product. You can make this ahead of time and just keep it in a sealed container in your fridge for a couple of days. But really you want to look for cans that have no salt added. And the ingredient on the can, if it's crushed tomatoes, should just say crushed tomatoes. If it's chopped tomatoes, it should just say chopped tomatoes, etc. Hummus is another staple I see in a lot of people's fridges. And it seems overwhelming to make, but it's really just 5 ingredients. So as long as you have a food processor, you could throw in a can of chickpeas, some olive oil, lemon, tahini, and garlic, and boom, you have your own hummus. And then, of course, you get to flavor it whatever way you want. You could put roasted peppers, beets, crushed red pepper for some spice. You could put Italian seasoning, a little bit of feta, whatever it is you like to make it your own. And you really have full control over what it is you're getting. This one's kind of a new one I'm adding on here because recently we started pickling our own vegetables and it's so easy. When you buy a jar of pickles, it's really high in sodium and you don't know how long it's been sitting in that jar. But something like pickling your own onions, it only requires a little bit of apple cider vinegar, water, a little bit of salt, a little bit of sugar. Again, you're controlling how much is going in it and then it stays in the fridge for weeks. And we really use it. We use it on salads, on sandwiches, on top of turkey burgers, turkey meatloaf. Sometimes I feel like people go out to eat because they don't get these kind of staples at home. They're like, oh, I go there because there was a place I used to go to because I loved their pickled onions. And now I figured out how to make them and I don't need to go there anymore. Salad dressings can be a very simple thing, olive oil and vinegar. But look at some of the ingredients on some of your typical salad dressings. It's not so natural anymore. So just because you stay away from creamier dressings like your ranch or your blue cheese, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going a healthier route. Even the fat-free dressing has sugar as a third ingredient. And other light dressings have things like high fructose corn syrup as a third ingredient. So really when it comes to salad dressing, you're better off making your own. And like I said, it can be really simple. All you need is olive oil and vinegar, or you could get creative. I have a favorite Greek salad recipe, and it's olive oil, lemon juice. I was going to add it and do another cooking demo on this, but it's really, really simple. In a jar, you just put lemon juice, olive oil, Dijon, red wine vinegar, minced garlic, and oregano, and it stays. I actually have it, put it out right here. And it stays really, really well for like a week. You could put red chili pepper flakes if you want to make it a little bit spicier. Again, you can make it your own. Growing up, we never had jarred dressing, and I thought that was just the norm. My parents would just do lemon juice, Dijon, and oil, and that was it. So really, you make it your own. If you don't like vinegar, don't use vinegar. You don't like lemon, don't use lemon. But it can be so simple, and the internet in this case is our friend because you can find so many great recipes for really easy salad dressings that you don't have to cook anything. You just mix things together in a jar, and it makes your life easier. Moving on to granola or bites. So most store-bought granola bars or bites are loaded with sugar in many different forms. With some chopped nuts, your favorite dried fruits, oats, honey, maple syrup, you can really make your own really easily. There are so many different recipes where you can bake your own granola, you can bake your own granola bars, your own granola bites. There's really so many recipes to choose from. Some of them use a food processor, and dates are your main component, and dates make it sticky and hold it together for you. And then I've seen them flavored with anything from cranberries to white chocolate to pumpkin spice. Now we're getting into that season. There's so many different flavor profiles you could go with when it comes to these kind of bites. And again, you're just taking control over what it is you're eating and putting in your body. So for today's energy bites, these are no bake energy bites. I'm going to be using super simple ingredients. I've got rolled oats, I've got shredded coconut flakes, and you want the unsweetened variety. I have ground flaxseed and chia seeds, and those are both going to be adding omega-3s, your healthy fats, to this. I have semi-sweet chocolate chips, honey, and peanut butter. So peanut butter and honey are your binders. These are the things that are holding things together, because as you can see, I don't have egg. I'm not baking anything. So the peanut butter and the honey are binding this together. Now, if you're watching your blood sugar, this has chocolate and honey. You have to kind of keep the honey in because of the binding that it does, but you could leave out the chocolate chips. You could put in some chopped raisins or some chopped dates instead to give it a little bit of that sweet pop without having the chocolate in there. So I'm going to switch cameras now. Mm-hmm. Now you can see me? All right, great. Mm-hmm. So I have a big bowl. So I start with a big bowl. I always do the dry ingredients first because this gets very sticky very quickly. So I have 1 cup of rolled oats, just your regular Quaker oats are fine here. I have the 1/2 cup of shredded coconut. And again, unsweetened variety. I'm already adding sugar to this in other ways. I don't need to add sugar to this from the coconut. I have 1/2 cup of flax. So flax, you want to consume it in a ground form. So I buy, this one, it comes already ground flax meal. And the thing is this is bought on the regular store shelf, usually next to like the pancake products and things like breakfast products, things like that. You can buy it in its whole form, and that's fine, but then you have to put it in a grinder because in order to absorb the healthy fats, it has to be ground. So if you buy it in the ground form, it has to go in the refrigerator once you open it because you don't want the fats to go rancid. So that's what I would say about this. I think people get confused because you buy it in a regular aisle. You don't buy it in the refrigerator, but then once it's open, it should go in the refrigerator because of those fats.
Would you say chia seeds?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that's the same chia seeds to refrigerate?
So yeah, I would definitely refrigerate chia seeds as well. I have the chia seeds going in next. But chia seeds, you could consume in their whole form. Your body does digest them in their whole form. So that's where people get confused as far as which one has to be ground, which one has to be whole. So chia, you usually buy it in its whole form and it stays in its whole form. But yeah, once that bag is open, it goes in the refrigerator. Good question. So actually next I will put half a tablespoon of chia seeds. And some people say that they just don't tolerate seeds that well. You could leave the chia seeds out. Again, it's just adding some more healthy fats into these bites. Okay, next I have half a cup of mini dark chocolate chips. I like mini because they go a longer way. When you put bigger pieces, you might only get like one per bite, or they just, the way that they spread out, the mini ones are going to spread out a little bit more evenly. So here I have all my dry ingredients. And next I'm going to add peanut butter. So if you like almond butter, use almond butter. If there's a nut allergy in the house, you can use sunflower seed butter. So really make it your own. You can use cashew nut butter. None of these ingredients are like a set for all. You have to use this. You could always swap things out. So I'm going to put 3/4 of a cup of peanut butter. The more natural you could get with the peanut butter, the better. If you start looking at labels, you're going to see that a lot of peanut butters have salt, have sugar, have a lot of things that are added into them. You really just want to see peanuts. I love the stores where you could kind of make your own peanut butter that way. So you want to mix it well, make sure that the oil is incorporated, and then use it. And then lastly, I'm going to put some honey. Again, if you're watching your blood sugars, you could leave out the honey and just put more peanut butter. You could leave the honey and leave out the chocolate. Again, make it your own. So 2 tablespoons of honey. I put a little less because to me, the chocolate chips give it plenty of sweetness. And honey has really great anti-inflammatory properties. So it's way better than just using your regular refined sugar, in my opinion. All right, now we're going to get messy. So as much as possible, I try to use a spatula, and I'll try to use one here. But really, if you have clean hands, dig your hands in and just mix it all together. So everything gets incorporated well. Like I said, this is not going to go in the oven. I'm just going to incorporate things really well, spread the peanut butter out as best I can, spread that honey out as best I can. And that's why I kind of gave it a little shake before I put the peanut butter and the honey in. So that way the dry ingredients got incorporated. And now I'm just mixing in those wet ingredients. There's no such thing as over mixing this because it doesn't have eggs. It's really just incorporating it all together so you keep mixing this for the purposes of not getting super duper dirty in front of you. I'm just using the spatula to show you how easily it does get incorporated. So if you guys could see, the peanut butter really it smells so good. If you like peanut butter, I mean, this smells so, so good. And then you refrigerate this for 20 minutes. You could refrigerate it for longer if you have more time. If you want to just make these right away, you could just wet your hands and start making balls right away. But just like the Food Network, I have a batch that's already has been chilled for 20 minutes. So see how it's like, it doesn't move. You see, it's all stuck together. So what I'm going to do is just take a scooper, or again, use your hands. I take a scooper so that they're kind of a little bit more even and my kids aren't fighting for the bigger ones. And that's it. It sticks together perfectly nicely. And I put it in a container that then can go in the refrigerator. So you just keep making these balls, and I am happy to keep making these balls as people have questions for me, because that really concludes what I was going to talk about, and I want to make sure I have plenty of time for questions.
Well, I know I'm hungry. They look so good.
Me too.
But could you speak maybe a little bit about gluten and perhaps gluten intolerance? There's a couple of comments about that.
Sure. So when it comes to gluten, so people, again, that's one of those things on the label that people see gluten-free, so they think it must be healthier. Avoiding gluten is really only necessary if somebody has a gluten intolerance or a true gluten allergy. Now, some people just say, oh, I feel bloated after gluten, and that's fine. But for the most part, I don't tell people to avoid gluten unless they've really been diagnosed as having an intolerance or having an allergy. Because when you take gluten out of products like bread that should have gluten in them, you're adding a lot more preservatives to give it that same texture, to give it that same flavor, to give it that same feel as if it had gluten.
Yes.
So whenever you're taking out gluten, you're adding a lot of preservatives to make up for it. So as long as you can tolerate the gluten, there's nothing wrong with it in my book.
Great. And then just in terms of the bites, how long do they last in the fridge or freezer?
So in my house, they don't last long, but they should last in the fridge for like 5-6 days. I put them in the freezer too. If I have an extra batch, like on a day like today that I doubled up the batches, I might put some in the freezer, again, in just a freezer bag, and they would last, I would say, about 3 months.
Oh, great.
But again, sorry, just to, I would keep them in the refrigerator. Like you could take them with you if you're on the run and they don't need to be in a cooler bag necessarily, but they're gonna, you know, they just taste better in my opinion when they have a little bit more texture that they get from being in the refrigerator.
I have a question regarding the peanut butter. I have high cholesterol even before I was diagnosed with the cancer. I like peanut butter. I prepare my veggie shakes with peanut butter. Mm-hmm. What type of peanut? Because the one that I use is the reduced fat peanut butter. So is another lie from the label, or can I continue using it?
So if it says reduced fat, I'm sorry if it was confusing. I didn't mean that it means that it's a bad product. I just mean that when it says reduced fat, it doesn't mean that it's low fat. In order for them to say reduced fat, it still has to be a reduced fat product. You're not being deceived by that. It is a reduced fat product, but it's still not considered a low fat product. So that's the differentiation. I think people see reduced fat and they think low fat. They see reduced sugar and they think low sugar. Exactly. And that's not necessarily the case. And when it comes to cholesterol comes from our animal fats for the most part. So your whole milk dairy, your cheese, your meat products, things like that are really what's going to affect your blood cholesterol levels. Not so much the fats that you're going to get from plant-based foods, like something like peanut butter.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Got it. Yeah, no, and I'm a meat lover, so.
So that's where I would more focus on than the peanut butter.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Now, one of women in the stated that they have a colostomy, and would this recipe be colostomy friendly?
So again, I would check with your doctor. It depends how long you've had it. It depends what other foods you tolerate. Generally, sometimes you have to avoid seeds with the colostomy or super high fiber foods. This is a pretty high fiber recipe. So I would absolutely bring it up with your personal dietitian or with your doctor to see if it's appropriate, because there's other ways to make energy bites that I think would be more appropriate to you. Something like dates or things that don't have so many seeds or nuts and things like that might be more appropriate.
And then I guess a follow-up to that, just in terms of surgery, the comment says, for many of us who have had multiple surgeries, bowel obstructions are not uncommon. The solution is low fiber diet, at least until the situation resolves. What is your recommendation for keeping a healthy diet which is not too high in fiber? Or maybe a better question is, what is your recommendation for transitioning from low fiber diet to a more healthy and normal diet?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So generally in your fruits and vegetables, it's always really difficult, right? Because your fruits and vegetables have a lot of fiber. And as a dietitian, I want you to get all the fruits and vegetables. So I would say, first transition into having your fruits and vegetables, but without the peel. The peel is where you're going to have a lot of the fiber of that fruit or vegetable. So if you're using zucchini in a recipe, peel it. If you're having an apple, peel it. And that's how I would kind of transition back into a more normal diet. But again, if you're having fiber issues, this might not be the recipe for you. When you introduce fiber back in and when you do start to follow a more normal diet, more regular diet, then I would you want to do it slowly. Implementing too much fiber at once, of course, you wouldn't feel too good after that. As you're implementing more fiber in your diet, really important to implement more water. Water is what helps you digest that fiber. So oftentimes I'll meet with people who have been implementing more fiber and they're having all these issues, and it was something as simple as just not drinking enough water with that fiber. So water is really crucial when it comes to implementing that fiber back into your diet.
And apparently sourdough is acceptable for gluten intolerance. The starter helps with digestion. That's just a comment in here. And another question is, do you recommend corn? I might be totally mispronouncing that, or almond or coconut flour over whole wheat flour?
So again, it depends on if you have an intolerance. If you look at those flours in the grocery store, some things are much more expensive. So, your plain old flour, it depends on what you're trying to go for. If you don't have an intolerance, there's nothing wrong with the flour, but it's always good to switch things up. I like variety. So if you're making a lot of things that have flour, use some almond flour, use some other kind of flours, and that's perfectly fine. But again, if you don't have that gluten allergy, it's not necessary, I would say, to invest in all the other kinds of flours. But of course, there's recipes that call for different kinds of flours, and that's okay.
Question on that. I have written a question, but are the other flours healthier? They're touted as healthier than white flour. More a health thing than, I don't have gluten intolerance. Just curious.
So if some of them might have more protein in them, because it's coming from a nut product or from a chickpea flour and things like that. So you might get more protein in them. You might get more fiber in them. So again, if you're trying to eliminate that fiber, if you're the person that was asking the question about fiber too.
I'm not.
Okay.
Oleostomy reversed. No,
Okay.
I just was wondering, are they really healthier, or they just said they're healthier, or not really?
I find that when I cook with flours that are not your regular all-purpose flour or whole wheat flour, then sometimes you're adding other ingredients to the dish as well to make up for the fact that it's not your regular all-purpose flour. So I would just see how you feel. I like having different flours in the cabinet. I'm just, like I said, I just don't think it's necessary to overhaul, and only use your almond flour. I feel like there's a time and a place for your different flours.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question. As I mentioned, my cholesterol is very high. I'm a cheese lover. So I try to eat low-fat cheese, but again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have fat. So what would you recommend to me to start, weaning out of the cheese?
Yeah. So first I would say I'm sorry because cheese and cholesterol really do go hand in hand. Definitely getting your low-fat cheese, because again, it's that saturated fat that's in your diet. And of course comes from a lot of your dairy products that is going to contribute to that cholesterol. I would find other ways to flavor your food instead of cheese. So on a sandwich, you could try something like those pickled onions. You could try something like roasted peppers. You could try other things to flavor your foods and find places where you might not have needed that cheese, like on that sandwich, because you're replacing with other flavors, or finding ways to, again, the low-fat cheese is fine, but I would just try to flavor your foods with other things. There's something called Nutritional yeast, and it's a plant-based product that vegans use a lot because it tastes like Parmesan cheese. So you can find other ways to get that flavor, to fill that craving without getting that saturated fat that's going to increase your cholesterol.
Okay.
And fiber really helps with lowering cholesterol. If you're allowed to have fiber is a really good tool in helping to lower cholesterol.
So you said nutritional what?
Nutritional yeast.
Yeast.
Nutritional yeast. Yeah, like bread yeast, but it's nutritional yeast, and usually it's sold with like the tomato products, or like near the Parmesan cheese. I think I saw it at Whole Foods. So different areas, but you could just ask your local store. They should carry it.
Thank you so much. Okay. I'll write it down.
I hope it helps, because giving up cheese is very difficult for a lot of people.
I'm addicted to it.
You're not alone.
And now
so really finding ways.
Right. And now with this chemo, what it has done is it has increased the appetite like crazy. Sure. The opposite. Sure. So I'm eating like an animal.
So let's say you're craving something like pizza, you can make a homemade pizza and really load it with veggies, and then just use the finely shredded mozzarella so that you're using a lot less of it. And they have, of course, the part skim. So whenever you can, go for part skim, go for, low fat. But again, a little bit goes a long way. So that same trick that I used for the chocolate chips, like the mini chips being better because a little bit goes a long way. The same thing goes with cheese. So when you're using cheese in a recipe, they have the finely shredded and then they have the bigger shreds. So you know what I'm talking about? So if you get that finely shredded, a little bit goes a lot longer way. A half cup and a half cup are very different.
Right. Excellent. Right. Okay.
Nana, your hand is up. Yes, I have a question. It's about cancer and dairy because I love cheese too,
Mhm.
and I love especially my cottage cheese.
Mhm.
Yes, and what I'm now buying the grass fed one,
Mhm.
and the sliced cheese I'm buying the grass fed one from Trader Joe's, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to incorporate goat cheese. So I wanted to know if it was something that I should stay away from or.
So some people, they feel like during treatment, they can't tolerate lactose. They might have
Mm,
been totally fine with dairy products before treatment, and now it affects them differently. So that's the first thing I would say to see if it is affecting you different than it was prior to treatment. As far as the research goes, I haven't seen any convincing research that says that dairy leads to cancer or dairy might progress it, anything like that. And we do know that it has your calcium, it has healthy fats, it has vitamin D in it. Well, it has your saturated fat, but it has other healthier components, and things like cottage cheese are great, kind of can be a low fat, high protein option for you. So as long as you're tolerating it okay, and it doesn't, interact with anything, I think dairy is totally fine. The research is just inconclusive about it.
Because I try to buy the grass fed, and if I buy milk, I use a lot of almond milk, but occasionally I'll buy the grass fed 2%.
Mhm.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's what's okay for you. As much as I would try to get like the no hormones added when it comes to dairy.
Okay, yeah.
Naturally, cows are very high in hormones when they're lactating and when they're producing the milk that we drink and the milk that's used for cheese. So you don't want to have them have added hormones given to them
Hormones.
to produce more milk. So I would go for, whenever possible, whenever it's financially feasible, go for things that are grass fed, organic, and hormone free when it comes to your dairy.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Janet, I see
Yeah.
that you have raised.
Yes. Curious. I read that goat milk is healthier. I started using it and I like it. Is it better for digestion?
It depends, right? It's still going to have, it depends on you and what you like. As far as the nutrients go, I don't think like your sheep's milk, your goat's milk, your cow's milk are pretty comparable. But I feel like nowadays there are so many animal-based products that might be even better as far as digestion goes, because lactose is kind of hard for a lot of people to digest. So I would say, see if you like it. As far, again, I don't see any research that says the goat's milk is going to be any better than your cow's milk or your sheep's milk. Like, the research just isn't there. I think every year there's a new milk that is touted as the new it milk. Last year, I think it was oat milk. So I think, again, it's just a way for companies to sell different brands and different varieties. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having goat's milk. It's harder to find non-fat versions of it or low-fat versions of it. So again, keep that in mind, because it's still a saturated fat coming from an animal that would be your unhealthy fat.
Do you think in a way like fat keeps us fuller and we use less of it? And the other argument is that all these low fat products add so much sugar. Like, better off eating less of the regular. I prefer it. And I used to be all low fat, non fat, and I stopped all of that.
So I definitely 100% agree with you. When you're taking something out of a product, you have to make it better or replicate it with something else, like your gluten-free products. However, when it comes to dairy and low fat or non-fat, dairy, your milk, and if you could picture what milk looks like when it settles after coming out of a cow, it has a fat layer on top. So when you're getting non-fat milk or reduced fat cheese, it's coming from that skimmed milk. And what that means is they're skimming that fat layer. So they're not adding anything to the milk. So it's not like when you get chips and it's lower fat, or cookies and they're lower fat and they're taking out the butter but putting in preservatives. That's much different than when you're getting a lower fat milk or a lower fat butter or cheese, because that just means that they're skimming that fat off the top and they're not necessarily adding anything to it. Does that make sense?
In a way, like, to me, overall, the regular fat keeps you fuller longer, tastes 1,000,000% better. So I've come to say, like, that's what I'm doing.
And that's fine.
fine.
And if that works for you, that's totally fine. But again, that whole fat and those whole milk products are what's going to raise cholesterol. So if cholesterol is something you're worried about or thinking about or is an issue, those whole fat products, are much less healthy than those skimmed milk products.
Mm-hmm.
So really, adults, the recommendation is over the age of 2, you should be having low fat or non-fat dairy products.
Really? Wow.
Mhm.
Wow, so early. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree, but whole milk, it's a much creamier, you hold a glass of whole milk next to a glass
Very
of skim
thick.
milk.
Mm-hmm.
They're totally different beasts, right?
Mhm.
Or you put it in your coffee and it doesn't, one of them changes the color, one of them doesn't. But yeah, I wouldn't feel bad about having those low fat dairy products. Again, when it comes to low fat other products, I agree with you. But like your low fat yogurt or your non fat yogurt, it's just the skimming of the fat, and they're not adding anything else to make it any better,
okay.
any different.
Right.
Okay.
I'm done with making them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just show
They're
you. So
delicious.
super delicious. And if you could smell it and you like peanut butter, it just smells like peanut butter cups in my kitchen right now. I just wanted to show you. And more when it comes, because we spoke about dairy a lot, so I just want to end it kind of on this note. Again, plant-based nutrition has been touted to help prevent cancer, help reverse heart disease, help lower blood sugars, help reverse autoimmune disorders. So when a lot of you that are concerned with that dairy, I would really try to look into the milks, the non-dairy milks, and find ones that you like, because there are so many products on the market. We mentioned oat milk, there's rice milk, soy milk, and there's so many different options. So again, going more towards that plant-based and not having that much dairy would also be beneficial as well.
She just said about the plant-based stuff. Does she know any plant-based cottage cheese?
Yes, there's a few on the market. If you look in like Amazon Fresh, Daya, I think is a good brand, and there's another, Tofuti is another good brand. I know that they make like non-dairy sour cream and cream cheese, and I'm pretty sure they make a cottage cheese. But like, if you just look at Amazon Fresh or Amazon Whole Foods and you just search non-dairy cottage cheese, you'll get a lot of options. And you don't have to buy it at those stores. You could buy it at your local store. But if you search there, you'll get an idea of what the packaging looks like.
Yeah,
You
most
said
of these
Amazon
things you can't
what?
get in the local stores, except maybe Whole Foods or Trader Joe's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Most
Amazon
of them-
Fresh, it's just another
Amazon
grocery
Fresh.
type delivery.
Okay.
Mhm.
Amazon Fresh. Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for this. I think it was really helpful to have this special time to ask questions with you. Just thank you so very much.
You're so welcome. It was my pleasure. And I hope you guys enjoy the energy bites if you make them and got some good information
Thank you.
from this.